Hi, I'm Amy Gutierrez.
And I'm Celeste Gehring.
And we're the hosts of the podcast, Girl, How'd You Get That Gig?
And we're going one-on-one with ADC partners.
Hey, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners, and thanks for clicking over here to check out this latest episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you like what you hear, go ahead and leave a rating or a review. Also, we now got over 50 episodes featuring decision makers from every corner of the sports business world. I mean, seriously, we've got interviews with investors, marketers, salespeople, brand reps, team presidents, founders, on and on. You can find them all at adcpartners.com/podcast. Now let's begin this latest episode, though, with a few questions. First off, do you work in sports? Okay, number two, would you like to work in sports? All right, just one more. Do you know someone who'd like to work in sports? Now, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then this episode is absolutely for you. My guests on the show are Amy Gutierrez and Celeste Gehring, two longtime sports media executives who host the quickly growing Girl, How'd You Get That Gig podcast. In it, they interview female sports business executives to review their career paths, share secrets to their success, and provide some advice to others seeking to follow in their steps. And while the show is nominally for women, the lessons and advice they tease out have value for everyone. I mean, honestly, just the stuff we talk about in this show is enough to give anyone a leg up in their search for a sports business job or to advance from the one they already have. It's a really positive discussion, even taking into account some pickleball trash talk toward the end. So thanks for listening, and enjoy my conversation with Celeste Gehring and Amy Gutierrez, hosts of the Girl, How'd You Get That Gig podcast.
Amy, I just want to know to start, how the heck did you guys meet in the first place? I mean, was there like instant chemistry, like, oh, that's my people? Or did you guys like stand across the room for each other and go like, oh, I don't know about her? How did it all come together? How'd you guys do that?
So we met on a dating app. And
which service?
I'm kidding. And we met so long ago, there wasn't a dating app. There was
that was
barely
cell.
there was barely cell phones. We met in 2001. Actually, I know the date. I met Celeste September 4th, 2001 was my first day at Fox Sports Net in LA. And we're showing little hearts to each other.
So sorry, it's only an audio only format.
I know,
so
but we
have to
are.
envision it.
They're going to have to feel the love.
Feel the hearts.
Yeah. And I walked in, I had gotten hired by my husband's former boss, Rick Jaffe. Shout out to Rick Jaffe. And he was at the LA Times and left newspapers to go into television. I had just gotten married to Paul. We were going to live in LA, had left my job in San Francisco at then Cron at the NBC affiliate, wasn't anymore. Anyway, long story short, I start my first day. I am so scared walking into this building. It was LA, like it was big time, right?
Now you've hit the big time.
Petaluma.
Stars in your eyes.
Yeah. And I met Celeste my first day, and I don't know what Celeste's recollection is of me, but I remember how tall she was. First of all, she's 6'1".
Okay.
And
a formidable presence.
Formidable, and she was getting it done. Like it was like 3 or 4 women amongst a sea of men. And here I come. I was just like a deer in headlights, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was hired to be a features producer, and that all went by the wayside a week later because 9/11 happened in all seriousness,
yeah.
Right? So like what I was hired to do, I actually never ended up doing. But what I got out of it was this amazing connection, work relationship, and friendship with Celeste. And I think it took us a little while to really connect and start hanging out socially, but immediately I respected her work ethic.
Celeste, did you look at her and you say, "Oh my gosh, this poor
scared.
country girl"? What
no.
this
No, I grew up in Idaho in a town
Yeah.
with one stoplight. So LA was just,
But you had been there
big
for a
city to me.
while.
Yeah, I'd been there for a while.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, Amy's tall too. So I just thought, oh, she's one of my people, right?
She's a tall girl.
One of us. She's a tribe.
We have a tribe.
Wait a minute, how tall are you, Amy?
5'10".
All right, you're 5'10", so 6'1". You guys walk into a meeting and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, it's a little humbling," right?
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
so you see each other. You're like, to your point, Amy, you're working in this industry that's quite literally it's you, a couple of women, and a sea of men. Was there a certain amount of, at that point in each of your careers, I need to find these other women in this industry and hold on to them tightly?
Yeah, because when we got in, Dave, there weren't very many women that were role models that were, at the level we wanted to be at, really. I wanted to be a VP or an SVP, right? Working my way to the C-suite. And there were no women there.
Yeah.
And so anytime you found a woman that was, one, you not only respected for their work, but you actually liked them as well. When those women came along, you just connect like
You did
that.
hold on tightly.
Yeah, you needed a support system because no one else could tell you what you were going through, or you couldn't share that with anybody else.
And so people who aren't familiar with your roles right now, can you give just a quick, Celeste, we'll start with you, and Amy, we'll flip it back to you. Can you give a quick 30,000-foot view of the path that you took very quickly into what you're doing right now, just to give people some context for the conversation that we're about to have?
Sure. I started as a production assistant.
Yeah.
I started logging highlights at CNN Sports Illustrated.
Oh, yeah.
I moved to Fox Sports for a cute boy, but it worked out. I ended up marrying him, so that was a good story.
That did work out.
Yes, but I started as a production assistant and just continued to work my way up. Associate producer, became a manager of a feed service, and then eventually became a VP of productions and operations. I've done like a lot of logistics, a lot of the stages for Super Bowls, All-Star games, Olympics, and that kind of thing. And currently what I'm doing now is I work for Bally Sports, working on video on demand, because everything's kind of switching, as we know, in our industry like crazy. So my ops job is totally morphing into more of video on demand and kind of dealing with the consumers and what they want.
That's a whole separate podcast. Okay, Amy Gutierrez, same question back to you. Just a quick path overview.
So I actually started in hard news. I went to Davis and majored in communications, and didn't land my first job in news until I was 25. I took a very long path to begin my career. And that job was a morning part-time associate producer. And I had to be at work at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah, it's the morning show.
Yeah, it was fun. I made $8 an hour. And then I moved up.
But all the glamour.
But so glitzy. Yeah, it was so great. I was like stepping over people who had gotten out of the bar and were falling asleep while I was going to work.
Yeah.
It was great. And then I moved up at that station to the night news. Then I moved to San Francisco, where I produced a show called Contact 4 for Cron. We were the NBC affiliate at that time. Then we all got laid off because NBC left San Francisco and went to San Jose, which is where it is now. Got married to Paul and landed the job at Fox Sports Net as a features producer. But as I mentioned, a week after I got hired, the world changed dramatically, drastically, horrifically. And Fox Sports Net was very affected. And we lost our national news show, and we lost a lot of employees. So I kind of became what I feel was like a glorified intern, trying to find video and help put together features for our regions across the country. And then that propelled me to Fox Sports Net Bay Area. So I started investigating an actual region, which was home for me. Moved back home as a contractor, and I have been a contractor ever since 2004. And I started at Fox Sports Net Bay Area as a producer, and that is what most people, they don't know that I have a news background, and they don't know that I was behind the scenes for so long.
We are breaking news here on this podcast right now. We are pulling back the curtain on this entire operation.
And today I have about 25 jobs, and we don't have
Not
enough
that you just
time.
listed 25. So you have
Yeah,
25
right?
right now. We
I
don't
have
have to go through
25
all of them, though.
currently, but I've just tried to take advantage of where the world is going with social media. I do a lot of influencing. I've joined the River Cats broadcast as a color analyst, which is huge for me just to continue to move forward in my reporting
Absolutely.
career.
Yeah.
And we launched our podcast, obviously. And then I signed on as an ambassador for Sonoma County Wine Growers, where I get to do my storytelling and journalistic work. And then I still work for the Giants part-time as a host and ambassador.
What I think is fascinating to hear from both of you as you describe the journey is that precisely that it's a journey, right? There's a lot of ladder climbing, there's a lot of jungle gymming, sideways, up, a little bit back, so forth and so on. But what's really interesting as you charted your path, you both were coming up in a time, I think, when it's safe to say, as we talked about earlier, is a heavily male dominated industry. And I'm interested in, you're both competitive D1 athletes, right? You come from a very competitive backgrounds. What did you have to learn individually and then maybe collectively together in order to succeed in that environment?
I think for me personally, it's all about just not talking the talk and being able to walk the walk. I think there were so many people who I felt like could have been my teachers or I could have learned from, and I knew that I knew more than they did, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, because they have this title, they know more than I do. And so I've really been one of those people that I want to learn and then I'll turn around and teach it. And I love to teach. I like for people to grow and to learn. And so for me personally, it was a lot about mindset as a D1 athlete,
Yeah.
right? Being the best. But I also felt like if I was going to help women progress in the industry, I had to be able to do it too. I couldn't just say, oh, yes, you're going to get to be a VP one day. Oh, yes, you're going to get to do this. Like I had to do it
Yeah.
to know what the highs and lows were so I could help people through it.
Celeste, did you feel that was something like integral to you about, it's like, I've had to work to get this job and these roles as a woman, and now, like, I want to make sure that that's part of who I am going forward? Was that really something you felt closely early on?
Yes, I tell this story all the time. When I was 8 years old, I grew up on a potato farm in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, and one stoplight, 3,000 people in my hometown. And I remember when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a reporter. And the reason why I wanted to be a reporter wasn't so much, in the limelight or anything like that as an 8-year-old kid. I wanted to tell people why women's sports were just as great as men's sports. Like I couldn't understand in my mind watching these games why people didn't make a big deal about the women athletes. Like it was hard for me to play, right? Like it was women should have been celebrated
As
too.
an 8-year-old.
Yeah. So that's what I always wanted to do is just really show what women were capable of. I grew up in a male dominated industry and farming as well, right? So I had males around me all the time. And I remember one time when I was a kid, I told my dad, I was like, hey, I can figure out how these trucks can go in better and do all this. And he was looking at me like, yeah, right. And I said, well,
Okay.
watch me, I'll go show you.
Yeah.
And I did it. And from then on, every season I was out there because I did it the best, So I think, yeah, there's this part of me that's always wanted to prove myself, but also just as the best human I can be.
It's kind of interesting that you got such positive feedback from it at such a young age to kind of set the tone for you, right? You needed to learn to advocate for yourself. Like, I know how to do this better and make that heard. But most of all, find the person who is going to listen to you to execute on that, to give you that opportunity to showcase the skill set.
Yeah, my parents were very supportive. Sometimes I fought with my dad on this, but
I
in the
wouldn't.
end, he always let me.
Yeah.
I have 3 kids. I don't know anything about fighting with fathers at all. Amy G, how about you? I mean, I hear that from Celeste. What about
Yeah,
you?
it's actually very similar. I have a very similar childhood memory. And if my mom was here, she'd confirm it. I would go in my room and pretend to be a newscaster.
All right.
And as I've gotten older, looking back at that memory, my role models were whatever the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news. And I believe I didn't have the capacity to understand at that time, but what I was seeing was equality. There was a male and a female broadcaster, and he read, then she read. They had equal parts. And I do remember not seen very many female sports
Mhm.
broadcasters, and I was curious about that. But my path was always really more towards hard news. Sports I fell into.
Yeah.
And so I believe I saw an equality there that I wanted to attain. And again, very similar situation with my father. I had a great male presence in my life with my father and my brother who were like, "You want to play? Get in here."
Yeah.
He coached little league. He used me. If you do the pickle drills where you're doing a rundown, I was the one being chased, right? Like he always, it was great.
Amy, get out here. We need someone to
Yeah,
run.
it was like survival skills at, the earliest age. And also with my older brother, like, I've told Celeste this story because she was a collegiate basketball player. I was a collegiate volleyball player. And I want to just make a quick clarification. When I played volleyball, it was D2 because I feel like I don't want to take that claim that I played D1. But Davis was D2 when I played.
I
But
appreciate the need for the hard news honesty here, but
yeah,
this is a
I
podcast,
know.
and the only person who listens is my mom. So
Okay, well,
mom,
just
she's
in
fine.
case
She doesn't understand the
just in-
difference anyway.
She fact
Just
checked.
in case she researches it, it was
Okay.
D2 when I
All right.
was there.
All right.
But my brother taking me out and playing basketball with me to teach me the sport because it wasn't offered to me as a little girl. We were offered softball and soccer,
Yeah.
and I decided to try out in high school. And he took me out and threw me around, and he had no problem treating me like an equal while I was on the court. And I believe it put me in a position when we did meet at Fox Sports. One of the first things I did, and Celeste was there. We were on the softball team together.
Yeah.
We were on a Fox Sports softball team, and it was an area where you could show your athletic ability and earn respect of your male colleagues by how you played on the field that translated back to the office. And I always put my sports on my resume. It was a talking point. I'm such a big proponent and believer in playing sports. And if you're not an athlete or they're not your thing, like get involved in something that you can throw on your resume that goes beyond the workplace, that you can socialize in a way with your male counterparts and get to know them as people. And then that definitely translates to, an equity in the workplace. And so that was one of the first things I did. And I remember having a few moments where, it was clutch and we won the championship. We had the trophy. Our team was so
She's like
good.
bragging on it already. It's interesting to hear, Amy, you start to talk about that. You start to slip in some of the, hey, make sure you have sports in your resume, and you're already, both of you, dropping tidbits of information that are useful for people who are considering a career path towards this, right? Make sure you do this, and this is the kinds of things that you should do. And that's a perfect segue to what you both are doing now with the Girl, How'd You Get That Gig podcast. You're interviewing prominent women throughout sports business about their career paths. And I'm interested in what was the germination of the idea between the two of you? Where did you sit down and go, this is something that's missing, or, oh my gosh, COVID's boring, or, what was the spark that led you to want to do this?
It's interesting. I want to hear Celeste's feedback on this because this is what I remember. So remember, we've got
It's a dark and stormy night.
Yeah, it was a dark and stormy night. Celeste was on the East Coast and I was on the West Coast. But
I poured myself a glass of Merlot.
Yes, Scotch. We poured some Scotch.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So we stayed friends, even though we worked together for a pretty short amount of time. It was 2 years.
Mhm.
And then I moved to Northern California. And fairly soon after I moved, I got pregnant with our first. And Celeste and I were staying in touch through all of it. And it's so funny. My son, who's now 19, still has the stuffed animal that Celeste sent with a bath towel as a baby gift. So our friendship continued even though we weren't working together. And it became a really important relationship. I can speak personally for me in having a sounding board outside of where I was working, where I could trust her. I could tell her what was going on, what I needed help with. Because I was really challenged with my first few years with the Giants job. And I remember having conversations with Celeste about, I don't know if I can pull this off. And she's always just the best friend and cheerleader. And she knew the business, right? That was the best part, is she knew what was going on. And we ended up having moments where we were able to still work with each other. And I was pregnant with my second child in 2007. And Celeste was up working the All-Star game. It was at the Giants then, and let me stay in her room with her. And so we got some social time. And then we worked a World Series game later on after that. So we kept running into each other, but the friendship stayed through conversations and through different jobs and moves. And so we kept saying, God, I wish we could work together again. I
You
wish
were
I was
looking for
working with
something.
you. I wish I was working with you.
Yeah.
And COVID did hit, and we started saying, we got to do a podcast. Like everybody's doing a podcast. Like this is what we.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. But ours would be so good.
Right.
Ours,
Unlike this hot garbage.
Ours would change the world.
Well, listen
right?
to this terrible thing by Dave Helmy. We could do better than that.
But when we would have these conversations, it was like we should be publicizing these conversations to a degree, right? I mean, minus the smack talk, as whoever we were talking crap about. But it was good information being exchanged between two accomplished women in sports.
Yeah, all the time. And that's how you remember it, Celeste?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely like that.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Well, Amy's one of those people where I feel, it's just when you get back together, it's like time just, I can't even
no time
say
has
it right
passed.
now. Yes, no time has passed, right? Like you
Yeah.
just pick up where you started. And she has been a constant in my life that will tell me the truth, right? Of what I want to hear it or not hear it, but always supportive too, of like, hey, here's how you can get better, or here's how you can do this, or have you thought about this? And she makes me think in a different way. And it makes me so happy. I have someone like her in my life who makes me think differently. Because I think everyone needs someone like that in their life, and to know that they're totally supported. So when we had talked, I had just moved out to the Bay Area again from LA. And I was just like, now's the time. And we had always said we would work together, and we kind of both knew we always would. And it's just been a really great partnership because we both come from different perspectives, but at the same time, like our core values are always the same. And we both teach. So I teach at University of San Francisco. She teaches at Sonoma State. So we both have that teacher in us, Dave, where it's like we want people to be seen and heard, and we want to make that impact, right? It's so much in our hearts and who we are. And we said before we started, we're like, we're only going to work with badasses who have big hearts. And we truly believe every woman we've interviewed, we just got done with Emily Cole, co-owner of the Savannah Bananas.
Oh, awesome.
She was amazing, right?
Yeah.
And every woman we've met, we want to invite ourselves to go and hang out with them because
we do. We just invite ourselves.
We haven't actually been taken up on it yet.
Yeah. We have not been taken up on it, but I think
we keep trying.
We feel like we're just meeting
waiting
more
for the
and more
right
best
one.
friends. Yeah. But I will just add to something Celeste said that I think is so important. And we were both experiencing this when you leave a job and people change, people that you were really close with or you connected with, then all of a sudden, especially in television and even more so in sports television, egos happen and jobs change and people get on air and all of a sudden they don't have time for you. And I was this person who had gone on air. And I remember Celeste saying, you haven't changed, because we were seeing people who had been production assistants and interns go on air and never talk to us again as we were running into them at different events. And I was like, what happened to her? Like, well, she doesn't know, that kind of thing. And it was really, really important to me to never, let that affect who I was at the core. And I believe because I was producer before, I didn't really care about being on air, but I specifically remember Celeste being surprised because my career went to camera that I didn't change and that we could pick up as old friends should.
But it also sounds like that's one of the premiums that you put on your friendship / partnership. You said about truth saying, like you knew that you could go to Celeste and be like, have I changed? And you knew you were going to get the straight no. Like she wasn't going to be like, no, you're the same, sweetie. Like that kind of thing. She was going to let you know if you were going sideways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's one of my favorite things about Celeste is you could not only can you count on her, she doesn't change. She's not affected.
Yeah.
When she's your friend, she's your friend. And that is hard to find in this industry. And something that we really try and express in our podcast is being genuine and being authentic leads to longevity.
Yeah.
When you try and be something you're not, or you're trying to fit into a box by wearing something that you're not comfortable with or doing something you're not comfortable with because you think this is what it takes to get the job, it's the wrong job. It's not right for you.
You're trying to fit into something that maybe you shouldn't have tried to fit in the first place. I'm
Exactly.
interested in the podcast experience because clearly I'm trying to do that here myself. You both come from a media background. You're both mostly, televised media, video media. I'm wondering what you're enjoying the most about this. Where you're primarily in audio. Obviously, it's the video clips and all that kind of stuff that you do too. Like, what are you enjoying the most, and where do you feel like you both can grow? Celeste, start with you. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly about doing doing a sports related podcast?
I love it because I learn all the time.
Yeah.
Amy's so good at what she does. And even though I've produced on air talent or coached on air talent is totally different, obviously being in that seat, and you have to do the reps. And so there's times when Amy's saving my booty and I know she's doing it. I don't even know if you know that I know, but I definitely know she's doing it in that moment. And I think to myself, oh, I could have said it better this way, or I should have slowed down. And so it's really helping me to stop and like listen to the conversation. And we teach this all the time, right? Everybody who's in media, like make sure you're listening to the conversation. But when you're sitting in that seat, you're like, it's hard to listen to the conversation because what am I going to ask next? And what I'm, like, is my hair okay? And like, what's happening here? So I've had a lot of fun just learning and meeting all the new people and hearing the stories.
Yeah. How about you, Amy?
For sure, in agreement with what Celeste is saying. I mean, the people that we're talking to are so inspiring. The best part of all of this is I look forward to every single interview. And I can't say that about a lot of other gigs. And as I mentioned, I've got a lot of gigs, right? So there's stuff I love about the gigs, and then there's stuff I don't like. But when we're getting ready for a podcast, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I mean, and then we get to plug who's next and like thinking about who we could get. And then they say yes. And you're like, really? Okay. You feel that like Sally Field moment. Like, you like me. You really like me. And it's just invaluable what they're sharing. And I think it's so needed because women, for some reason, get very territorial and don't discuss the specifics, the journey, the salary, the hours, the balance you're trying to find for those of us who have children and marriages and families that we're trying to take care of. And then on top of it, Celeste talks about what I'm teaching her, but here she is, she's the backbone of all of it. Like, we kind of came up with this idea and then she made it happen, and she creates the graphics. And if there's nothing she can't figure out, I tell her all the time, go slow. Like, and that is a skill set of mine, is I can listen, right? But I've learned that over the years. And Celeste is just now getting into broadcasting because she's calling games at UOP for basketball and for softball. So this is all like kind of the right time for her to be doing on camera stuff. But for me, it's the technical side of things, how she puts these Canva PowerPoints together and switches out the graphics, and we need a color scheme. And I'm like, what? Oh my God, just give me a tease to write. Like, I know what my skill set is, and it is fascinating to watch her work.
But it also sounds like you guys are crossing over into each other's, not spaces,
worlds.
But you're both kind of beginning to learn to do the things that the other maybe had been doing previously. And I suppose that's an inevitability associated with a partnership.
It's been really helpful. I mean, as you go and get all these different jobs, now keynote speaking is becoming something I'm doing. And I'll go to Celeste and be like, can you help me with a PowerPoint? Because I don't do that. She's like, yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm so like, this is nothing. And I'm like, oh, so any help or guidance that I'm able to give her, it's just as rewarding to see her put it into action, and vice versa. And learning that the second you think you don't have something to learn, you should stop what you're doing. And we're both hungry always to learn. That's why we teach. I don't think there's anything more rewarding than seeing a student put something into action that you critiqued them on or helped them with. And the same goes for our podcast. I mean, each one we do, we feel gets better and better and better. And now we just need to get paid for it, Dave. That's all.
That's one of the objectives here today. Figure that out.
Sponsor.
Who's
Absolutely.
listening?
Who's
Who's
listening?
listening? Yeah, yeah. That's been the ugly part. If you're saying the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's the toughest part. Is you're finding your passion, but you do need to make a living at it, and so that's where we're focusing
Yeah,
on now.
it's
is
not like you don't
sponsors.
invest time and energy into this, right? It is something that does require a lot of sit down, find the guests, research the guests, figure out the questions you want to ask the guests, do the edit and everything like that. And there is a part that is the passion part. You're doing something because you feel like it's important, that
Mhm.
you want it's the teacher in you that you're going and you're exercising that. But you do have to allocate for your time.
You do.
You do have to associate with it. And that's the end goal. This is to make this something that is sustainable going forward for you both.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dave. We appreciate that.
Everything I can do. But you
Hey.
know, it's funny. I do want to touch upon something you said earlier that I think is a really important point. That is, you said something about women and territoriality
Mm.
previous. And I think it's like when you both got started and there were fewer women in the industry, and this is sort of a trope that women got a little protective of their space as they climbed the ladder, and it was hard for them to get there. So by God, I'm not going to let anybody else pass me by, kind of
Yes.
thing.
That's fair.
It's hard. It was hard, particularly when there weren't as many women in sports business. That's my broad assumption. My other broad assumption I'm going to make is that it's gotten a little bit easier with more women in the business now. So has it gotten easier, or have the pressures just changed to something else?
Well, I'll start off with a story. I never forgot this story. So a woman that I worked with, she was another VP, and she said, Celeste, why do you teach your staff all the stuff you know? Because you're going to be out of a job. And I said, well, if I'm out of a job, then it's time for me to move on, right? Like if I have learned everything I need to know, I've taught my team everything they need to know, and the brass thinks I'm out, then I'm out. And what's interesting is she has been laid off and has been out of work for a very long time. And meanwhile, because I have really helped, people grow and learn, those people have always connected me to another job, or they've helped me out in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
I don't think it's necessarily gotten easier for women. I
Mhm.
think there are a lot more doors open for women. Like they've been doing a lot of studies on this during the pandemic. A lot of people of color have now come through the doors of television and social and everywhere, but they're staying stagnant in entry-level positions and middle
Right.
management. And I think that's what happened too, Dave, with the Me Too movement, is there were so many women that were coming in through the doors, and they've kind of stayed stuck still in those positions. We're starting now to see women grow because a lot of women are using their voice, just like we are, right? To be seen and heard, to be understood, and to also help open those doors for other women. So we had a guest on, Cosmina Schulman, who I think Amy said it best, where she's like, if you're in that room with a bunch of men, are you advocating for a woman who's not in the room? And it just like hit the nail on the head, I think, with
Mhm.
where women need to go is we still need to advocate for women that aren't in the room because they're still not in the room. There may be one or two, and like you said in the past, a lot of those women were extremely territorial because they had worked extremely hard to get into that spot, and they felt like they were going to lose that spot if they helped other women get in there. And they also wanted to be special, right? And show that they belonged in that room. But as we know, like there's so many people that belong in that room and so many people that work hard. So I think for me personally, it's been a lot about, it has been in some regards easier for women to get in through the door because other women are pushing it open, but I still think that climb is just as hard.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I don't know if it's so much easier as we're just more prevalent now. When I first started covering the Giants, I was one of a handful of women in the clubhouse, and then it's growing. And so what happens is some of the pressures are alleviated because of numbers. So there is power in number, and I think that's great. In my particular role, it was so territorial, and it was like the other team's in-game reporter wouldn't give me information on her players, or it was like, yeah, I don't know where he is, or that kind of. And then I'd find somebody who was helpful, and I will give her a shout out because she's one of my best friends in the business. Alana Rizzo was one of the first female in-game reporters that came up to me from her team. She was covering the Rockies and I had the Giants. Hey, what do you need? Who can I help you with? And I took that as a template to be that way for reporters coming into my home park.
Yeah, once you've been on the
And
receiving end of that, you really feel
you
the power of
you
it.
should do that. You should do that. And you know what? How am I hurt by her reporting on the team I cover, right? So it's letting go a little bit of ego and the fear that we have. What if somebody takes my job? Listen, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I would say while we're seeing more women in this spotlight in general, and Celeste is dead on. They're in a lot of entry level positions. And so then for those of us who have been around for a long time, where it's getting harder is to stay
Yeah.
and to stay at a salary level that's fair, that
Yeah.
we've earned. Because I'll tell you straight up, I was told multiple times in contract negotiations, there is someone younger and cheaper. And I had to find my voice and come back and say, okay, does she have the relationships that I have? Has she put the time in that I have?
Does she have any skill whatsoever?
And
Yeah.
the skill
Yeah.
that you have to learn. And yet, so you don't want to like hurt your own. And yet you're like, you got to pay your dues to a certain degree. And so we're still, I think there's been a ton of improvement. And now you're seeing women's sports really explode, which is fascinating and so deserved and so overdue. But it's finding that balance between really getting what you've earned and continuing to be respected. And I go back always to what Celeste is saying, like, I'll teach you what I know. There's room for all of us. There really is. And I would rather, if I lost the job, be the one that people liked working with, because I'm going to land somewhere else, than the one who didn't share anything.
It's just not that big an industry. I mean, it seems really big because it's high profile, but I mean, you're 2 degrees of separation from just about anybody in this industry. So that long view of where can this eventually lead that I don't know, I can't even see now because it might be so out, is absolutely the way that success is found, I think, in this industry versus, well, I'm not telling you the day of the week, it's because, that'll give you an advantage over me seems so short-sighted to me, but unfortunately prevalent. It's certainly not just sports, right? I mean, that goes on in every industry around the world, but it's certainly one just given the competitiveness here.
And reputation to me personally is everything. How is somebody talking about me when I'm not in the room? And I really pride myself on being somebody who says, oh yeah, no, she totally helped out. She's great to work with. She's easy to work with. She's professional. And those are the things that matter at the end of the day. And then really being able to diversify your skill sets and be willing to learn new things and try new things. That's how you stay.
Hence having 25 jobs. Celeste, can you talk about the response you guys have gotten to the podcast? Have you got any feedback? And have you heard things that made you say, God, I'm so glad we did this?
All the time.
Yeah.
Just all, and our podcast is for men and women because, that we have female leadership across the board. And a lot of men come to us all the time too and ask us for help or, information. And I think one of the best comments I've gotten is like, why has this never been done? Right? Like, I think we get that actually a lot, but people are like, this was so needed. Even Emily Cole said that, she's like, this is so needed. I can't wait to watch you grow. I can't wait for you to fill this space. And it's amazing to us that no one has really highlighted women in the sports industry because there, as we've gone through, there are so many of them, right? That we're finding left and right that are, behind the scenes. And that was kind of like the premise too for our podcast. Because Amy, could have gone with another, talent or another host or another reporter. And we kept talking about the importance of having people that were behind the camera because Amy had that background, right? She is a news hound. She is one of the best producers I've ever seen. So just taking that premise and saying, okay, we have people behind the scenes. We have a groundskeeper that we're going to be interviewing tomorrow for our podcast. And we're fascinated by that because no one talks about that. And having a woman actually do that job is fascinating to us.
You guys are on about episode number 20 of the Girl How'd You Get That Gig podcast.
We're going to record 22.
22?
Yeah,
I have to get with my fact checkers. I'm interested in like what themes have started to present themselves to you now that you've got this sort of body of work. Amy, what rises to the surface?
A couple come to mind immediately, which is say
I can
yes
tell because again, this is an audio only format, but
I know I raised my hand. I like so many of the women have said the same thing of say yes to everything. Just say yes. And if you find out it's not what you want to do, more power to you. That is
Equally
its
valuable.
own power. It's equally valuable. And oh my gosh, there's been so many things, a lot about education, a lot about education. And while it's super important, getting this experience, getting dirty, getting in there and trying these jobs is just as beneficial. A lot of the women we've interviewed have gone on to get their master's or their doctorate, and looking back, didn't know if they needed to do that. Glad that they did it, but it's just so, it's so broadening to think you don't have to go A, B, C, D, E. You can kind of create your own path
Boy, now
here.
more than ever.
And yeah, and it's all about, though, like really being passionate. And they've all said you got to love what you're doing. You got to love it, and cuz you got to commit to it. We interviewed from the Houston Rockets. She was the VP of partnerships, and and they're really honest, which is so, it
Oh, it's
doesn't
amazing.
sound like that
Yeah.
should be refreshing, but
But
it
it
is.
is.
Yeah. And she's like, listen, I am at the arena more than I am at my house. And you don't get holidays off. This is the NBA. We play on Christmas, and so being able to have that kind of openness and vulnerability so that people listening, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
For some of us who got into sports, this was a big surprise.
Yeah.
Like, what? I got to work on a Sunday.
What's a double header? Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the biggest thing that comes across, the first thing that jumped into my head was so many people say, you got to say yes
Yeah.
to things. You
I
got
love
to be
that.
willing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Celeste?
I think a lot of what has surprised me is a lot of women didn't have it figured out, right? They didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. And so
Mhm.
they took a bunch of different jobs to figure it out. And it was different because I think half of our guests have known, right? Like they wanted to be in some area of that field, like myself. And then other people were just like, I just fell in. Like, I didn't even know that this was a thing. And I just kind of fell into it. And that's what I'm doing now. So that's been
Mhm.
really inspiring to see that, because you're going to end up on your path no matter what, right? Like you're
Mhm.
going to get there.
It kind of goes
Mhm.
back to the say yes kind of quality to the whole thing, right? It's along the lines of if you don't open yourself up to opportunities, you
Mhm.
may find yourself in a place where you didn't expect to be and you don't like, or you may have never discovered the thing that actually becomes your passion. I mean, one of my favorite examples of that is I have a friend who's got a son got a job working up for the Wine Country Baseball League up in Napa, and he was in the mascot costume between innings, and then would take the head off and run up and announce the lineups
Yep.
for the whole thing. Like they just said,
Yep.
can you do this? And he,
Do it all.
yep, do it all. And he's fallen into announcing because he just loved it so much. So it's a great example. It's a great piece of advice, male, female, starting out, long time experience. That when a door of opportunity throws itself open to you, don't think that it's not for you, or even worse, that it's beneath you. Because in this industry,
100%. Oh
there
my
is no
gosh.
such thing.
Well, the other one that comes to mind, I just have to say this just because I'm so in agreement with the entitlement side of things of our younger generation. And I say that because I have two of them
That are listening from the
came
other side of
that
this wall.
came from my body, and it's about being a little more thorough. We talk to a lot of people who hire people, and when you have grammatical mistakes on your resume, you haven't used spell check, you didn't capitalize somebody's name, like think it through. Take the time to be thoughtful and efficient, and it goes so far with people, because the second some of these women who are, Celeste is one of them. Like, if you have a grammatical error on your resume,
Out the
bye,
door.
Mhm.
You're
gone.
giving
It
people a
makes
reason to say no.
it makes her job very easy to not interview you. So it's little things like that that are being repeated in each episode that you hope the younger generation really starts to say, yeah, I need to read this out loud before I send it, and have somebody look at it, and, take a beat. Everybody's in such a hurry, right? This whole generation, it's about immediacy, and they can get anything they need tomorrow from Amazon. I get it, but you can't get your career tomorrow. It is a build, and it is a journey, and you have to be patient and put the time into it to make it worth it.
Celeste, as you think about the podcast, what's been successful to this point, how do you see it or how do you hope it's going to evolve? From where you see it now, what is your
Money.
Amy, you're not helping. I'm trying to have such gravitas right now. Trying to be professional.
I'm comic relief, Dave.
Yes, in addition to finding some financial sources and financial streams that go on to this, what are some of the things that you're hoping for that come out of this?
Just to really make a difference and an impact. The women that are sharing their stories, I'll go back to Emily Cole because I just was so inspired by her. They have a Bananas Foster organization that helps foster kids, and how she was talking about what they do for foster children is so badly needed for the world at this time, right? And so just knowing that our podcast can make an impact where someone says, oh my gosh, I heard that podcast. I heard Emily Cole. I really want to be a foster parent. How do I make that happen? I'm going to try to get a hold of her. And just all the people we've interviewed are doing something amazing, and they're really trying to reach their full potential. And I think the great thing too is, as women that have been in the industry for a long time, we see a lot of women get pushed out because of their age, right? And we see that all the time, left and right. And my hope is with this podcast, a lot of times I see with the Good Boys Club is if an older man gets pushed out, his buddy over here is going to help him get a job with this next network or with this next group. And, it's like, let's take care of the women. And I think what we're seeing is women are deciding, you know what, I'm not going to put my eggs in your basket and try to make that happen. I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And so there's women of all ages that are starting their own business, that are starting to do their own podcast. And it's like that ball will continue where women are making, more money or, getting sold to a network or something like that. Again, where we're making a difference for women.
How about you, Amy?
Complete agreement with Celeste on it. I mean, finding out about Emily's, advocacy efforts through the platform of sports, right? And in almost every single person we interview has some type of community service that they want to talk about. And at the end of the day, Dave, that is really what it's about is are you helping people move forward? Are you making people aware? And from the smallest detail, we interviewed a gal who was in human resources at Nesson, and she discussed how to ask for a raise. I mean, that's huge. And it's free advice, so that's a big deal for anyone.
Amy Gutierrez and Celeste Gehring, they're the hosts of the Girl, How'd You Get That Gig podcast. It's found on all major podcast platforms. You should definitely check it out. There are, as we've been talking about through the course of this entire conversation, so many gems that we just touched on in this conversation that are going to be not only for people who are thinking about if they want to work in sports, but people who've been in the industry for a long time. There's a lot of good, refreshing things to consider that you're going to hear that are going to charge your thinking about how you approach this industry, getting into it, or maintaining a great track record in it. So both of you, thanks so much for joining me today. But before I let you go, we're going to have to put you into the lightning round. This is a series of unexpected questions. I just,
I love this.
it can get dangerous. So,
I'm horrible at trivia.
Did you sign the waivers?
No.
Okay. Well, even better. Even better. So these are not hard. These are not hard. This is not trivia. This is not
Celeste,
trivia.
listen, we tell our guests this too, because we have a little game that we always say. We're always like, it's not hard. And then they're like, you said it wasn't hard.
All right. Well, okay. We'll be the judge. All right. We'll see how
Okay.
this goes. So we're going to start with you, Celeste. If you could be any one athlete for 24 hours, who would it be?
Ooh. Oh.
Not you, Amy.
Oh my God.
Skip it.
Back when they're prime or right now?
Back in their prime.
Michael Jordan.
You want to be Michael Jordan for 24 hours. Just to see. All right, Amy, I wasn't going to ask you that one, but given the fact that you're about to explode all over the camera.
Mary Lou Retton.
All right,
Can I tell your story?
Yeah, very good. Okay.
I do have a story about
No,
Mary
it's
Lou
not.
Retton.
This is a lightning round. This is quick.
Oh, sorry.
We got to go quick.
Okay.
That's a whole different thing.
It's a good one.
We'll save that one for later. Volume 2. All right, Amy. What's the
Yes.
hidden talent that Celeste might not know about?
I know lightning round. I'm not going fast at all. That Celeste wouldn't know about. I don't know. Does Celeste know that I play piano?
No.
Ah,
There you go.
see? We've learned
There
something
you
today.
go.
We've never played
Wow.
piano.
Yeah.
Well, of course, she might have just made
play-
that up under pressure.
I didn't. I swear.
All right, Celeste, you were once a senior remote operations manager for the New England Sports Network. How would you describe driving in Boston?
Like hell on wheels.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
I had to replace 4 tires.
Yeah, that
And
sounds
we
about
had
right.
to we had to haul our mobile stage to Fenway every day for 10 miles.
Oh my
The
gosh.
guy before me, the stage truck actually fell on another car
Yeah.
before I had that job. So every time I, was going out there, they're like, you better not flip the truck. You
Don't
better
flip
not
the
flip the
truck.
truck.
It
Yeah,
seems
I'm
like a simple request. Don't flip the truck.
I feel like
until you
that's
drive
the
in
answer.
Boston.
Yeah, that's driving Boston. At least you didn't get stuck on Storo Drive.
Oh.
Amy, your bio says you spent some time as a wine consultant. What
Yes.
would be the perfect pairing for this podcast recording?
Oh, well, it's a little hot today, so I'm gonna go with a crisp Sauv Blanc from Sonoma County, Dave, and Sonoma County grapes.
I don't think we can both say enough about Sonoma County. Having not only Sonoma County, but we're both from Petaluma, which makes us both
So
Petaluminaries.
funny. He's actually right. He's sitting next to
We're
me right now.
on the street. Bad way of thinking. All right, we're gonna start with you, Celeste. You're both Division I athletes, Division II. Celeste, you played basketball for LSU, and Amy, you played volleyball for UC Davis. What sport are you going to play head to head for bragging rights?
Ooh.
Is Celeste first on this?
It doesn't matter. Whoever can throw it out. It's the lightning round. There are no rules.
We're playing right now at 50 years old. Let me just
Yeah,
double
right now.
check
Like
that.
if you're going outside right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be inside. You could play video games. I don't
Well,
know.
I will take Celeste on in pickleball all day long.
All right.
I was going to say that.
Oh,
Got
I
you.
think we just
Pickleball,
established.
it's on.
It is
It's
on like
on.
Donkey
It's
Kong
on.
is what it is.
The best part is we rotate Celeste, so then we will be partners at one point. But if you're going against me, watch out.
Okay.
I think I could sell tickets for this.
You
Celeste Gehring and Amy Gutierrez, thanks so much for spending the time today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dave.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.